Welcome to the Crafted Conversation, the voice of the crafted concept, brought to you by me, Marcus Sharrod. The Crafted Conversation is my opportunity to speak and give credence to guests from the world of education, educational leadership, elite leadership in general, and of course elite sport, for instructors, those interested in instructional methods and imparting learning, to come and explore, be curious and be open-minded, how we can, as instructors, be better in the way that we package learning for our elite athletes and our pupils. The crafted concept is underpinned by the idea of a learning environment, what that environment, what the culture, what the setting looks like. Learning design, so how we actually piece together what our considerations are around the way that we package that learning piece. And finally, learning critique. How open are we? How curious are we to find out what our learners actually know? How can they be flexible in the way they apply what they know? How has that learning become durable? And the same for our pupils, and indeed for our colleagues, for those of us that are acting in leadership positions. So without further ado, we'll get on with today's episode of the Crafted Conversation. Welcome back to my regular listeners. Good to have you. Let's get on with it. Welcome back to the Crafted Conversation with me, Marcus Sharrod. And today I'm here to talk about storytelling. I'm here to talk about narrative, about the construction of identity, and how we can use stories, create stories, draw upon existing narrative within the environments that we're performing in to enhance our performance. This was actually the topic of both my undergrad and postgraduate master's dissertation. In my undergrad, I looked at how, as a former elite footballer, how the presentation of masculine identity of footballers of at the time, we're talking kind of mid to late 2000s, what was described as a sort of hegemonic masculinity, so like a non-compliance towards a certain type of masculinity as presented by football. And I looked at the presentation of footballers in Nike adverts. At the time, remember, we're talking sort of 2010, 2011, then there was this movement towards more of the what was described as like a metrosexual identity, sort of driven really by, fashion forward, different hairstyles, different ways of clothing, different ways of presenting masculine identities in sports media at that time. I suppose David Beckham was the forerunner for that. There was some stuff I remember looking about Gavin Henson, the Welsh rugby union player at the time as well. But yeah, really fascinating. And do you know what? Interestingly, in preparation for this episode, going back and reading some of my dissertation stuff way back then, and ascribing new meaning to it now. This is the power of story, because I'm going back and looking at a work that was highly rated and received a really high mark on that university course. But I look at it now and I can ascribe completely different profile to it, because I'm no longer a still high performing but not professional, recently failed footballer, and actually those identity trends and flows and the ways in which we assign ourselves certain belief systems depending on the environments that we find ourselves in, can dramatically kind of alter our perspectives. And I'm living proof of that. I grew up through my teenage years in that quite heavily masculine, team-oriented, extrovert presentation of football as it was then. And for those listeners who were involved then, or my mates listening, we'd smile and think about what times were like back then. But to then go, okay, well now I'm looking, the lens in which I'm looking through that piece of work that I created then is completely different. I now am a 12-year educational professional, senior leader in education, a performance coach, someone who supports the development of others, a dedicated husband, a father. The lens is the empathic lens, I suppose, the life worlds which I bring to my viewership of that particular piece of writing that's my words is completely different. I found that compelling, And it really motivated me to get stuck into this particular conversation. And so I should say as well, sorry, that as a wider microscope, I suppose, into the power of story, I altered my perspective on my master's dissertation by looking at colleagues who work within my sports sciences department and drawing on their life worlds, their experiences prior to teaching, and how they have influenced or created conflict in their development of an identity within the narrative structure of exercise and sports sciences department at a public boarding school where, with a department that's seen success, that considers itself to be a forerunner in driving academic profile of the subject. And how does that work when you come from a professional rugby background and all the kind of constructs that come within that sort of subculture, if you like, when you come from one of my other colleagues, performance netball, but sort of career-ending knee ligament injury, and actually wider kind of emotional, situational things growing up, and how that then leads to the how you assign yourself within the complexity of a social environment, a social construct that is a department within the education setting. This is a brief pause in today's crafted conversation to talk about how the crafted concept, the overarching business that supports the crafted conversation, both in newsletter and in podcast form, can best support you in your performance environments. The crafted concept has experience working in the education and elite sports sectors through performance coaching for individuals or for teams, the learning environment, by focusing on those three pillars of the crafted concept of performance: learning environment, learning design, and learning critique. Contact me directly because I can help you, as I have done on many occasions, developing a sense of cohesion within the team. Performance coaching aims to drive individuals and teams to excel. And as a performance coach, I am an expert in areas of teaching and learning, instructional design, motivational psychology, team development, performance culture and environment, and performance mindset. It's my job to generate activities, use questioning, listening, observing, probing techniques to deliberately seek feedback and present opportunities for lateral thinking and inspire growth and ideas for you as an individual or for the performance of the team and the collective. The crafted concept is your accountability partner, is your critical observer. I'm able to draw upon experiences as an expert teacher and instructor and as an expertly qualified executive coach, performance coach with over 100 hours worth of coaching experience. As a coach developer in elite sport, I can support and guide coaches through the complexities of your professional development, of your professional environment, offering structure and assisting you in refining your skills through learning environment, learning design, and learning critique. Contact me directly, Marcus at thecraftedconcept.co.uk, or look me up on LinkedIn, Marcus Sharrod. So storytelling. Well, the science behind human potential and storytelling is vast, and I'm just going to take a short dive into that today. I have given a kind of personal background into my research in storytelling in my undergraduate and postgraduate thesis, and there's a plethora of peer-reviewed resources out there, of research out there, and I'm going to break that into just a few different sections here for my regular educational leaders and elite sport coaches to support the storytelling and narrative constructs within your environments. So first up, why is it that stories are so privileged in our mind? I can't remember who it was that said it. Stories are privileged from a neurochemical perspective. And the reason is storytelling is associated with fireside conversation, with our ancestral past, living in tribes. Darkness falls, fires are lit, and we tell stories. We tell stories of our forefathers. We tell stories of religion, stories of Christianity. You know, our narrative is woven into every aspect of our lives, and therefore, over time, our brains have adapted neurochemically to recognize that. And therefore, stories trigger senses of trust, of empathy, of connection with others at a personal level. I love that scene in Ted Lasso. There's this real sort of poignant scene during series one where I forget the name of the sort of maverick player that they've got. I think it's Danny, and they're out on the training pitch and it's night and they've lit a fire in a wheelie bin and they're burning things that remind them of elements of their past that cause conflict in their playing identities. And there's this real sense of connection between the team. It's a wonderful scene. And that's oxytocin. Neurochemically, we can draw ourselves right back down from I am Marcus and I have these values and these belief systems. But actually, all we are is a neurochemical reaction to events that occur in front of us or existing events that we've loaded into our long-term memory, chunked in a combination of when X happens, I feel this, and neurochemically stuff happens. And oxytocin is the same neurochemical released in the connection that you make with your newborn baby, for example, as a new mother. That's why newborn babies are placed straight onto the mother for that connection, that touch, that physicality, that incredible release of oxytocin, unrivaled than in that moment, in fact. But stories develop that release of oxytocin. It creates trust and empathy and connection. And if you're in an environment where you need a team of people to perform, which essentially is any performance environment, then synchronizing with the emotions of the storyteller or the characters, the protagonist within the story can really enhance engagement. This is known as a process known as neural coupling, which basically improves the retention of memories, but also the emotional impact creates a deeper sense of encoding with that memory. And so creating stories in your environment that are emotionally charged, that draw on more than just objective detail, can really gain a sense of trust and empathy. And of course, if you trust those that you're working with, then you're going to perform better. But before I continue, a nod to Keynote Educational. Keynote are the partner of the podcast, and as ever, with the Lent term at its halfway phase here, then they are looking towards a range of conferences. The Special Educational Needs conference forthcoming in London has been is pretty much a sellout, I believe. There may be some tickets left if you get there quick enough. They've also got the usual list of leadership, aspiring for leadership, departmental, you name it, exam, feedback, they've got it. And listeners of the Crafty Conversation can claim 10% off at checkout using the code CRAFTED10 for any Keynote in-person course or conference during the remainder of the 2025 Lent term. So get yourself over to keynoteeducational.co.uk and the code is CRAFTED, CRAFTED 10, CRAFTED 10 at the checkout to get your 10% discount as a result of being one of my dedicated listeners. So how else can narrative help develop our performance as human beings and as collectives? Well, by ascribing your own personal narrative to one that exists within a wider social entity. So, for example, when I employ as a leader, I'm trying to employ on value-led. So if I believe that a physical education curriculum should focus on the individual and the development of athletic principles, athleticism, core fundamental movements that can inspire and create a foundation of movement in any physical setting, then I don't want to employ someone in my department who has a really strong belief system on the fact that we should be playing traditional games and learning through play in the teenage years, picking teams and off you go, doing really traditional sports that allow the footballers to thrive and the non-footballers to continue to hate physical exercise, and actually do the reverse of what we've just described. I play team games in my PE lesson. I hate team games. I'm describing my sister-in-law here. That I don't enjoy team games. I don't enjoy the physicality. I don't enjoy the kind of like driving to win in a physical environment. And therefore, my brain has encoded physical activity equals non-enjoyment. And then we lose that gift that we have to move. So when I employ, I'm not looking to employ to create conflict. We need to consider what the value systems, the stories that we're placing on the environment are, and then draw people into that environment who can ascribe their own personal values, personal identities onto the wider social one. And that constructs a greater sense of meaning, can boost motivation and boost resilience. Reframing is really important here as well. Or even I listened recently to, I love the Modern Wisdom podcast with Chris Williamson, and he had Tony Robbins on. Tony Robbins spoke about framing, but he used the phrase pre-framing. So I'm actually going to try and engage my brain before the event to pre-frame what's going to happen. So pre-framing something like failure, which, let's face it, in an elite sport environment, you're going to embrace pretty much on a weekly basis. And as regular listeners know, that my greatest experience and the majority of the elite performance and professional sport work that I do is in football. Football is a low-scoring, random game where you could be the best team on the pitch in every metric possible and lose 1-0. And so pre-framing failure and considering performance goals over those outcomes and what will we do when those failures come, that pre-framing or reframing, redemption, if you like, redemptive storytelling can be really powerful and actually mean that when those occasions come around, then we're not left hung out to dry, but actually have somewhere to go next as a group. Studies have also proven that, many studies have proven that having a dossier or a glossary of terms or a curriculum map for my educational colleagues, having a scheme of work, having a lesson plan, having a coaching kind of rubric is obviously really powerful. That objectively demonstrates what it is that you're trying to achieve as a coach, as a teacher, as a leader. But it's dry. If we think back to Simon Sinek's work on starting with why, then if our why engages the emotion, it engages the storytelling, the oxytocin, the connection, it engages a sense of call to action, dopaminergic response of saying, well, I want to be part of this because I believe in it. It's made me feel emotional. I empathize with it. Then the X's and O's or the bullet pointed list can gain additional meaning. Now, that's not to say, by the way, that those objective things, those plans, those strategies aren't powerful, but they become more powerful when a story can be attached to them, or when they can be illustrated with real examples. They can be drawn upon from a real perspective. And that's obviously, if we think of observational learning theory from Albert Bandura, then the vicarious experience or the ability to link to previous performance is going to create a deeper sense of encoding around your performance metrics. If I'm sat in a team meeting and my head coach is discussing a new strategic response to playing in transition from attack to defense, but can draw on examples that it's worked with people that I know of, the team, another team perhaps that we play against, or one in the Premier League, and I recognise players, or indeed a time that we've used it as a tactical strategy ourselves and it has worked. Storytelling, I suppose, is almost like your feeling element of dual coding. I have the written instruction, but by giving the story and giving the feeling, then that deeper sense of encoding is occurring. Of course, the deeper we've encoded to the long-term memory, the more chunk that information is, the more additional pieces of knowledge, the story being the knowledge, the bullet pointed objectivity being the strategy. Then if I can put those two things together, then the coupling of those things mean that they're easier to recall and retrieve, And the easier they are to retrieve, I can draw them down from the long-term memory and they become, hopefully, automated. And automation is how we reach that higher level of performance. And this, of course, is another reason why we know that mental rehearsal, creating visual images, can be powerful in elite performance. This is perhaps more of a sporting background, but we as British, we've got this real sense of hoodoo around anything that's slightly more Eastern, dare I say. The idea of sitting as a group, as a defensive unit of 4 players in a football team, and watching some video analysis, talking about the story of how we perform out of possession, what shape we should be taking, where we are on the pitch, and then sitting in a line or standing in a line, closing our eyes and moving together, talking through the process, imagining, having someone else like the coach narrate what's happening on the pitch, and you manipulating your body, moving, creating those mental pictures and mental images, making your very own moving story that is going to give you the mental automation to perform in that manner on the pitch on a Saturday. And particularly in lower league football, where the money isn't there with the resources to bring people like myself into those environments, and therefore there's a little bit of a prevalence perhaps. I always think that beyond about the Championship, there's about a decade behind the Premier League in terms of perhaps even more in terms of the way that those performance environments are approaching methodologies which support player performance off pitch, and storytelling in your communication, regular language that becomes automated, language that has a real deep sense of meaning because there's a story attached to it, is powerful, it's emotive, and we are collectively going to gain in performance as a result. So I love a shout out to my listeners. As ever, thanks so much for your questions that are coming in and your engagement with the content. What I would love to do is, rather than read out a question this week, please write in, drop me a DM on LinkedIn, or go straight into marcus@thecraftedconcept.co.uk. Drop me an email and tell me how you are utilizing story, either currently or how about as a result of this episode, how have you been inspired perhaps to look at story in a different manner and embed it within your performance environment? So listeners, drop me a line, Marcus Sharrod on LinkedIn or marcus@thecraftedconcept.co.uk. Look forward to hearing from you. The engagement is increasing week by week, and I love that. You're helping me move towards a place that I can be as supportive as possible and gain performance in as many different areas of the educational elite sport world. So love to you. See you next week. So we come to the end of this week's podcast episode of The Crafted Conversation, also available in newsletter form by going to www.thecraftedconcept.co.uk and subscribe there, or indeed at the bottom in the show notes. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm Marcus Sharrod. We're on Instagram at @thecraftedconcept_, and also YouTube, The Crafted Concept, where the weekly newsletter content goes up in video form. If anything today is of interest to you and you want to get in touch with questions, if your question is read out on the podcast, I will get in touch back with you for your free 30-minute performance coaching consultation as a result of your question being curious enough and interesting enough to have been read out and addressed on the podcast. And equally, if any of the work of the Crafted Concept in performance coaching and consultancy with a particular focus on teaching and learning environments, learning design, and how we critique that learning for performance is of interest to you in the education or elite sports sector, then do get in touch. And you can do so directly via email, marcus@thecraftedconcept.co.uk. See you next time.